Hello and welcome to yet another episode of the Talent Waste Show. You know by now, you know the drill. We're on a mission to find out if talent waste exists through research, statistics, easy for me to say, and brilliant guests each week on the show, the very show, the Talent Waste Show. What is talent waste? You know this by now, but talent waste affects organizations across all industries at all levels. It occurs when an employee leaves an organization prematurely due to that business not being able to retain them. We've done some huge research and statistics since we launched the technology business actually a couple of years ago. And between 30 and 45% staggeringly of employees leave organizations within the first year, according to the Office of National Statistics. And according to Harvard Business Review, a big research piece of work done by Harvard, 80% of employee turnover is due to bad hiring decisions. So we're having a look at this and we're saying, actually, so if we can improve our hiring decisions and actually we can improve our retention, what effect does that have essentially on our business? During series one, we spoke to industry leaders about their experiences with talent waste and how they've managed to navigate and deliver some excellent initiatives through, let's be honest, probably some of the toughest times in business through the pandemic. We've had some fantastic guests already in the second series, and to be fair, I'm very, very happy to have this next guest on as well. As always, you can catch up on the show via Crowdcast and Spotify. Obviously, subscribing to the YouTube channel at Phoenix51, or check out our LinkedIn page, or of course my LinkedIn page as well at Lee McQueen. But let's get to it today. I am delighted to have a guest who has, let's be brutally honest about it, had a wonderful career in staffing, in recruitment, and now in technology. Kalpesh is a seasoned leader and chief executive across the talent and staffing world, spanning 25 years, showing your age now, Kalpesh, 25 years. Kalpesh has led and grown some of the biggest names in the industry, not least SThree, Computer Futures, and of course, Hamlin Williams as well. Now, as a board advisor and a NED to some of the best up-and-coming SaaS businesses in the sector, I am completely delighted to welcome Kalpesh Baxi. Kalpesh, welcome to the Talent Waste Show. How are you getting on, bud?
Thank you very much, Lee. I'm really, really happy to be here.
Yeah, no, amazing to have you here. So look, I mean, the list can go on and on and on of all the things that you've achieved, and just give the audience, the viewers and the listeners, a bit of an insight into the world of Kalpesh Baxi and what you stand for and what you're all about, buddy.
So Lee, my story is a very simple one. I fell into recruitment like most people, literally fell into recruitment, and joined a very up and coming business back in the days called Computer Futures, which then became part of SThree. So in my 25, 26 years, I've had the privilege, and I call it a privilege, of working with companies from all sizes, from startups to scale-ups to the big corporates and the brand names that we know globally. I've worked with some very, very strong mission-driven organizations, purpose-driven organizations, etc. And the one thing that comes out for me right the way through from, if I go back all the way through my career, the one thing we still struggle with as a society is, how do we hire the right talent? And then once we've found them, how do we keep them? And, you know, I'm quite lucky that I've got an incredible network, and I've worked with some great businesses. Off the back of that, I've got involved with a whole bunch of SaaS HR tech companies, and you and I know a few of them already, that are really trying to solve the principles. So typically the businesses I get involved in today, I look for two core principles. I'm looking for organizations that are addressing that D&I agenda that companies are trying to achieve. So how do you hire the right talent? How do you get the right sort of purpose coming in? And the other strong principle that is important to me personally, because it's part of my personal journey as well, is about social mobility. So for me, it's how do we create an environment and a working environment where people get the opportunities and chances that, and you and I have had many conversations on this over the years, Lee, about our personal stories. But how do we give people the chance and the opportunity of leveling up, of stepping up, and of getting those opportunities they might have been closed off to?
I mean, absolutely brilliant, and we could probably talk for hours on this, but I want to start there, if I can, because I think that is one of, you know, I share a lot of the same values as you, and that's probably why you and I get on. But that social mobility piece, and that having an opportunity or giving a chance to people that, it's not about giving a chance to people that ordinarily wouldn't be given a chance. It's just having a fair opportunity in front of people, isn't it, Kalpesh? To be fair, to say, look, does it matter if you've got a degree or you haven't got a degree? What is the key element that we're looking for in our people? Now, there's some opportunities that you have to have a degree for, and there's some opportunities you don't need to have one for, but actually opening that talent pool a little bit wider and saying, have you got the right, I suppose, is it attitude, Kalpesh, for you? Like the right attitude, the right behaviors, the right desire to come and do a fantastic job, whatever that job may be.
Yeah, I think is, look, as you said, there are some jobs. If you want to be a doctor, you need some skills to be a doctor, right? But I think what we're learning more and more in society, we're on that constant journey now, reskilling and upskilling, etc. So for me, it's not so much give everyone a chance because they just deserve a chance. It's how do you give those people that don't have those connections, those insights, and that word insight will come up a few times if we talk about data, right? But how do you give them that insight? How do you give that experience? So one of the organisations I'm involved in is all about helping underrepresented talent get more jobs in technology. And the whole point about this organisation is it's putting people through boot camps, it's putting on networking events where they can connect with people, where they can get a mentor. So you're absolutely right. Look, there's a chance. And we have a fundamental problem in the world at the moment. We are talent short, right? Even with everything that we see going on, the number of vacancies, and I know I've read something this morning, courtesy of our friends at LinkedIn, that the number of jobs are down year on year, but we are still talent short. Companies are still crying out for good labour. So I think more and more so, it's like, how do you unlock that network out there of people that you wouldn't normally look at to say, look, you know what, by using this assessment process, we can look for more people with potential. And you know, you and I have had opportunities in our careers where people go, look, this person's got something. They're not qualified for doing that job as a manager or a leader or taking on that big company, that big client, but they've got something in their DNA and their makeup, which if we unlock, will give them a chance to actually step up and do an amazing job for us.
I absolutely love it. I mean, you're literally like it's the same page. I mean, just talk about that potential piece for me, because you know one of the reasons why we set up, I set up the platform that our sponsors of this podcast, Phoenix51, is to try and unlock that potential, to actually try and have a look at, okay, and potential isn't just about rookies or juniors or raw talent, essentially. Potential is about leaders. So have they got the leadership potential? Have you got that seniority potential as well? So for me, it's across all levels. But trying to understand that potential, what is the best way in your experience over that 25, 26 years of trying to unlock or understand what that potential may be? Is it behavioral, Kalpesh? Is it kind of watching, looking? You mentioned assessment. Is it that? Is it a combination of all? Like, what's the kind of the silver bullet here?
I think the answer is all of above. So, I think there are many companies that are trying to do it through data, just using data. There are other companies that are trying to do it based on behavioral insights or triggers or indicators that people have got coming through. There are other people that are now saying, well, if you've got these skills, we can transfer that skills into these working environments. I think the answer is there is not one answer, Lee. You've got to use a bit of everything. And I know we talked about your platform. Your platform's designed to try and unlock some of those things you wouldn't normally look for, to say, look, here's some things you might want to look at that might make this person a good employee or good prospective employee. If I just talk about something in society right now, and I know the UK government's all over this about how do you get the over 50s back into the world of work, because they're having too much of a good time apparently, and we're a bit labour short. The reality is a lot of people that are over 50 that chose to leave the workforce don't want to go back and do the same jobs they were doing. They don't want to go back into having super stressful jobs, running big teams as leaders or managers. So there's actually a degree of, and I haven't got the right term on this, Lee, but whether it's downskilling, right skilling, but that population needs to get a whole bunch of new skills to be able to come back into the workforce. Likewise, and this is the bit that probably you and I are experienced of on the other side of the coin, how do you create those employers to say, look, here's a tool, here's a talent pool that you wouldn't have looked at traditionally, but you're going to have to change the way you manage them.
Yeah, no, it's
so there's
really
two sides.
Just to interact on that, I want to explore that the over 50s and the labour shortage piece. When the pandemic hit, in the NHS, obviously, they were, I mean, you could argue they're vastly understaffed even today. They've always have been. But when the pandemic hit, even more so. And one of the key things was about trying to get people back into the NHS. And actually, if you think about it, especially at doctor level, nurse level as well, but certainly at doctor level, people retire pretty early, right? So you're leaving, you're studying to become a doctor. You're in that profession for a kind of a short period of time, really, compared to maybe other areas in the workforce, and you're leaving relatively early. So that expertise is literally leaving, like you said, the over 50s is leaving that industry, and we can't replenish that quick enough. So actually, to try and bring people that are over 50s, that cross skilling, that upskilling. Do you think that employers have a kind of a, I don't want to pigeonhole everybody, but a stigma attached to, well, actually, you can't learn new things if you're at a certain age or at a certain maturity, and therefore, actually, we're going to go with a rookie, shall we say, or a raw talent, an early careers individual, because they're going to be able to learn and drive. When actually, that could also be counterproductive, right? Because somebody who's kind of over 50 has got all of that experience of being in them stressful jobs and all that stuff, and then they're learning a new skill. Surely that's a bigger toolkit, isn't it, Kalpesh?
Yeah, it is. I mean, the thing is, it's you know, and I've probably made those mistakes in my career in the past, saying, look, this person, because they've done this for 10, 15 years, that's it, they can't reskill. I think the reality is you can reskill at any point in life. It's the chosen design. I think we are now as a society accepting that you have to reskill and you have to constantly keep learning. I think there was a really good Harvard Business Review article recently about how do you reskill an aging workforce. And if you look in certain parts of the world, they're better at doing this than we are in the UK, particularly because they've had a talent shortage for years, you know, and they basically understand that actually there's a whole bunch of skills someone can bring back once they've done something. And you mentioned, you know, doctors and nurses, and I know it's a topic close to your heart in that respect as well. But, you know, if you think about that nursing population, you know, we went out there and try and get all these nurses back into when we got hit by COVID. Why did it take COVID for us to go, all this lost workforce, we need to get back? And then we made it really hard for them because we said, right, you've got to go back and get re-onboarded to be able to do this job. It's ridiculous, you know, in terms of coming through. So I think we've got to look at ways of saying, look, you know, you don't have to work 38 hours a week. You can work 10 hours a week, but you can be really valuable, or you can teach a whole bunch of people how to do these things. So I do think, you know, we've got some opportunities. One of the platforms I'm involved in at the moment, we're trying to work out how we can do it, but it's basically we're trying to build up a skills exchange. So rather than being a training company, what we're doing is trying to build up a platform where all the training providers are there, all the employees are there, but the individual owns their learning passport. And one of the things that we've really identified, Lee, is unless your company, and as an employer, and you've probably done it with people who work for you, unless there is a benefit to your company for a person to go and get trained, you don't train them on that particular thing. Now, if you flip it on its head and say, right, most individuals that want to go and do something else, they get restricted because they can't afford to. So what we're trying to do is work out, well, how do we get some of that grant funding, etc. And, you know, if I think about nurses particularly, there's a very different case with England and Wales. In Wales, the Welsh NHS pay for people to go and get their nurse training. You know, they don't have to pay for it. In England, nurses have to come out with a bucket load of debt. So if we think about different ways of doing it, so we're trying to look at different ways of using funding that can help someone get at least, even if it's a level 1 or level 2 qualification on something, then an employer can say, well, look, you've got so far, I will now take on responsibility to develop you further.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. It's interesting as well because, you know, Phoenix51 actually powered the largest apprenticeship nursing program about 18 months ago in the UK, and it was with a huge private company that actually funded them apprenticeships and that type of thing as well. But again, the responses of people wanting to do that career and come into that world was overwhelming. I mean, it was actually heartwarming, Kalpesh, of people wanting to be able to do that. And sometimes, going back to your point, sometimes it's process that stops them from coming in. It's not just, it is that regulation piece. Is actually, do you know what? I would come back into that industry, but it's going to take me so long to be re-onboarded that it's actually not worth it. Or, do you know what? I would come into that industry for the first time, but actually I'm going to come out of it, as you just said, with 60 odd grand worth of debt or whatever it might be. And it becomes a prohibitor. So there's certain things that we definitely need to look at on that side. We've mentioned insights a few times, so let's talk about that as well. I mean, one of the things that struck me, I mean, you've had a stellar career in the staffing and recruitment. I've been in recruitment now for staffing and recruitment industry in and around 22 years myself. And one of the things that struck me is that as an industry, and especially at the likes of SThree, Computer Futures, it's very entrepreneurial. Recruitment can be very entrepreneurial. So it's almost like we breed entrepreneurs within our industry, within the sector, which is hugely positive, and I think it's fantastic. However, what's quite interesting is that we give people a chance. We give that rookie a chance. You fell into recruitment. I fell into recruitment. We give that. Oh, do you know what? He or she's got something about them. And actually, inadvertently, what we're doing is we're looking at the behaviors, the values. Like, does this individual, can this person fit? Do you know what? I think I could mold this person into. And we're quite good at that in recruitment, in that staffing industry. What's quite perplexing to me is that outside of that, we're not as good at that. Like other sales opportunities, for example, if you're coming into the recruitment sector from a sales point of view, like we did back in the day, other organizations, say in media, say in technology, for example, they're not as versed as giving them opportunities. Have you found that as well? Do you find that quite perplexing in a sense of, like, most of the time we're driving that recruitment from our industry because we're the recruitment industry, yet the end clients, as it were, don't seem to be as entrepreneurial, take that kind of that viewpoint that we do?
I would say majority, I agree with you. I think, but what I'm starting to see, there is a change. If I just use financial services as a benchmark, it's one of our biggest industries in the UK. There are, give or take, 1.3 million people that work in financial services across the United Kingdom directly. So forget the indirect workforce. Financial services has got a problem at the moment, because if you think about all the experience that's leaving financial services, the banks are trying to find different ways of saying, well, look, I've had all these people working in a branch, they're leaving the industry. How do I retain that knowledge and maybe try and find them a different opportunity? The other element you've got is in recruitment, you have to do it because it's an industry, actually, it's still relatively young. So we're creating that industry, even though there's over 200,000 people that work in recruitment in the UK. But we're still creating that industry. So we have to hire on potential. We have to hire on culture fit. We have to hire on people that say, look, you've got these experiences. Can they translate into what we're looking for over here? I do think in some industries we're going to start seeing more and more of it. But look, people like the platform you're involved in will help companies start to understand, this is the straitjacket of what you've always been looking for. There are a very small percentage of people available today in that population. If you widen the perspective of what you're looking for, and really interestingly, we've both been in the industry over 20 years. It was hiring for potential. That was a buzz phrase 20 plus years ago. It was like, hire someone that got lots of potential. Then we started hiring people for job ready. We'll only hire people that can do that job today, right? And now we're kind of going back to saying, well, look, we've got a skill shortage. We need talent. Let's start going back and hiring people with the potential. So have they got the aptitude to learn? Have they got the skills that can transfer? Have they got the right outlook to say they're forward thinking? They've got that learn or growth mindset to move into that different space. And I think slowly we're starting to see some interesting moves coming through. Are we there yet? No. And look, you can see it at the moment where some industries are still crying out for talent and they're having to pay a significant premium.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, let's talk about we're talking about talent. Let's talk about talent waste quickly. We'll go for a break and then we'll come back after this. But I just wanted to have a part of your experiences, if I can, on the talent waste piece itself. We're on a mission to find out if talent waste exists. And Office of National Statistics states that between 30 and 45% of hires leave in year one on a recent study. And I found that staggering. When we first found that stat, I started to look into that. I mean, to put that into perspective and put some numbers around that, between £12,000 and £30,000 per bad hire is muted by CIPD. So it's a cost around £12,000 to £30,000. If you look at that lower scale, if you're hiring 200 people and only retaining 70% of them, in other words, 30% of them leaving, that's a staggering £750,000 annually that you're literally wasting. And it is madness to think. Like, I've had to triple check and quadruple check these numbers, Kalpesh, because they don't compute. So we've got, on one hand, we need more sales revenue, as I mentioned earlier. We need more sales revenue. We need more business. We need more new customers. How do we grow our revenue? But actually, on the other hand, we're just literally letting it roll down the sink, and actually retaining that talent and bringing people into the organization that will retain because of values, because of behaviors, because of what our core beliefs are as an organization and where we're going. Do you think, have you got an experience with that where you've kind of just seen it kind of coming in at the top and then just literally leaving, and then that rinse and repeat cycle? It's difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, and you talk about the bottom end of the pyramid in terms of that entry level or that voluminous workforce. Think about when you're hiring that C-suite. It's the same story when you hire. How many companies have you read that every 12, 18, 24 months they're losing the CEO? It's a constant. And the worst thing you could ever do is lose from the top, because even though it's one hire, actually it's not a £12,000 to £30,000 hire you're missing out on. It's the value is bigger, because the actual ripple effect in the organisation and the chaos and the instability it causes all the way through. So that talent waste piece, I know the typical stats always look at the entry element of it, because that's something you and I are particularly involved in. But if you take it to the other end, and actually talent waste also exists at the top tier, the middle tier of an organisation. So those numbers might actually become more scary. It's not 12 to 30,000. It could be £100,000 impact.
Yeah, well, it's interesting actually, because in series 1 we had John Hull on the show, and he was, at the time, he was the global resourcing director for Nationwide. And he mentioned that their analysts had done a study in that financial services piece. It's Nationwide, and for every 1% people that left in year 1, it costing the business £100,000. I mean, it's like literally staggering. So people will look at that and they'll say, how do we get more talent? There's a shortage of talent. We need to get better people into our organization. We need to we want to beat our competitors to that talent. But actually, by finding people that maybe you wouldn't have necessarily looked at before, coming back to your point right at the beginning around widening that talent pool and looking at a diverse workforce. You get a diverse workforce, and I'm not just talking BAME, I'm not just talking male or female, I'm not just talking graduate or non-graduate, I'm talking all of it. To have a diverse workforce, to have a diversity of mind, gives you that ability then to be able to retain, to get different ideas into the business and retain your staff. The knock-on effect of people leaving the business is also huge, because if I join because a Kalpesh is there, and then Kalpesh, you leave, then all of a sudden I think, well, hang on a minute, I don't want to be here anymore. And then you've got Fiona that thinks, well, hang on, if Lee's leaving, and it has that constant effect. And that's probably the hardest thing in business that I've found personally, like running the companies that I've run and managing in the corporate world back in the day, and also with the clients that we talk to. That's probably the key thing, is like there isn't a silver bullet for it, as we mentioned before, but how do we start to put in place a better solution so that we can keep the talent that we actually want to keep?
Yeah, I think the starting point is that word, it's culture, right? And whether you talk about corporations, whether you talk about education, whether you talk as a family unit, as culture and DNA in terms of what it works to, right? And I think it's really important. And we talk about talent waste. A lot of people now leave organizations because they're really, really clear. I love my job, I love my team, but I don't love what the organization stands for. Or they're looking at certain markets going, well, I don't buy into the mission of what we're trying to achieve at the moment. So it used to be, I don't love my job, and they'd leave. Now there's other factors that they're looking for. And I think we talk about Gen Z, and Gen Z more and more is all about mission and purpose driven than any demographics of workforce we've ever had. So I think that cultural element is really, really important to say, right, how do you create that culture that people buy into? How do you create that DNA in an organization? So, and I think you're familiar with, I know because we've spoken about it, but the Gallup 12, the 12 questions that Gallup have, one of the questions one question out of those 12 is, do I have a best friend at work? Well, if you don't identify with someone that you get on with at work, or that perceived best friend is the person that leaves, you're going to be sitting there going, do I really want to stay?
Do I want to be here? Yeah, exactly. And again, I completely agree that behavioural piece is that everybody will have. I don't know whether you or the viewers or listeners have read Dr. Stephen Peters' book, the Chimp Paradox. But ultimately, everybody will have like that logic part of your brain, that chimp part of your brain, and the computer. And the computer is the part of your brain that is fixed in your beliefs. And ultimately, so we believe certain things. Like, for example, I believe that, I don't know why, but I believe Tottenham at one day will win a trophy, for example. No, I mean, joking aside,
I thought we were going to keep this as a positive one today, Lee.
I know. one day, Kalpesh. I hope. I don't know if I believe. I think I hope more. But I mean, from a belief perspective, you're looking at from an organisation. This is what we believe in. This is who we are. This is where we're going. And actually, to not recruit on them seems completely weird to me. Like, it just doesn't make sense not to recruit on them. To recruit on a job specification for that skill that you need for a particular job, regardless of what your values and cultures are, just doesn't make sense to me.
No, it does. And look, the difference is, a job spec is a job spec. It's just a set of words, right? And the fact is, that's not what a person might read a job spec. And I've done this, I've looked at job specs and I really like that. Then you get into the company and go, well, I don't really like how that's set up. On the other hand, I've looked at job specs and I don't really like the job spec, but I love what the company's trying to stand for. We'll make that job spec work. Yeah. So I think it's having both sides. But the other thing for me, Lee, is people understanding, everything starts with that hiring journey. And I know, we talked about pre-boarding before. So, most people talk about onboarding. We make the onboarding slick. So like, take it back a level. It's the pre-boarding. And before you go for pre-boarding, it's how you're building up that networking awareness. Because everyone potentially, and I know one of the things I was talking about to someone yesterday is, look, you've got to make sure everyone that leaves your organisation, if they leave you, they are the biggest fan, the raving fan, to make sure they're talking great things about you, right? On the other hand, if you turn someone down in the interview process, the experience has to be super slick, because in 3, 4, 5 years' time, they might be that star hire that you're looking for.
I mean, again, completely agree. Feedback on that specific area is key. I think one of the things that our industry and a lot of organizations around the world, because of that, has failed on, in my opinion, is that feedback. People don't like giving bad news. It's a psychology thing. It's a human nature thing. No one likes. Well, some people might get off on it. I don't know, but most people don't like giving bad news, do they? No. So when you've got 200 or 300 applications for that one job, you've got to disappoint 199 or 299 people. And, people don't like doing that. And that is indicative. And actually, instead of embracing that by saying, these are the reasons why, this is what you've done well, this is what you need to improve on, these are the key reasons, this is our behaviors, this is who we are as an organization, and this is what we're looking for. And unfortunately, you come short because of X, Y, and Z. That's a much, much better experience than somebody who's just either getting a phone call, getting an email, sorry, you've been unsuccessful, or God forbid, not getting anything whatsoever. And
I was going to say, I think the term is ghosted, right? It's like typically you go for an application phase and you've been ghosted.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, this is a good point to take a mid break. I mean, it's absolutely fascinating. When we come back, I just want to talk to Kalpesh a little bit about where Kalpesh feels the staffing and ultimately the technology part in RecTech or HRTech is going for the rest of 2023 amidst the, let's be honest, the turmoil that we've seen over the last kind of 18 months, 2 years or so. We're back after this.
Phoenix51 is a powerful employee technology enabling organisations to make data-driven decisions at every stage of the employee journey, from hiring through benchmarking and development too. The platform provides detailed analytics on the most important asset in your business, your people, enabling organisations not only to make the correct hiring decisions, but also how to benchmark, train and retain them. Phoenix51, powering your people decisions through every part of the employee journey.
So we are back, and that was from our channel sponsors, of course, Phoenix51. You can go and check them out on their website. Kalpesh, just coming back around on the on not necessarily on that talent waste piece, but where we feel now we're moving over. What are we coming up to the end of the first quarter already, which is madness in 2023. We've had to, as startup organizations and even big established enterprise businesses across the world, all of us from top to bottom have had to deal with a global pandemic. We've had to deal with Brexit. We've had to deal with the war in Ukraine. We've had to deal with the energy prices. We've had to deal with the cost of living. We've had to deal with the blimey, I'm proper doom and gloom, aren't I? We've had to deal with the talent shortages and that type of stuff. Yet I still look around. I still speak to people like yourself and network with my peer group, and there's still businesses out there that are thriving. There's still people that out there with that entrepreneurial spirit, that they're still coming into setting organizations up and trying to drive change. Where do you sit with that, and where do you feel our journey is going over the next kind of year, 18 months or so, Kalpesh?
So I'm the eternal optimist. So I'll sort of I'll dovetail what you're doom and gloom and say, actually, all of those things are opportunities, right? It's depending on how we look at it. So, I think if we talk about from a talent point of view, there are probably three headline trends that keep popping up: the Great Resignation, silent quitting, and inflation means I need to earn more money. So no matter how excited I am, everyone should have a basic right to be able to support their lifestyle and support their families, etc., coming through. So I think, the big thing if I go into 2023, the conversations I'm having with companies that are getting it right is they're very, very clear on what roles they need to fill, how they go about doing it. And I think more and more so, you and I know a lot of HR professionals or TA professionals, it's actually building an integrated talent strategy. So rather than just hiring what I call job-ready people, and there's a degree of that, can this person do this job? Can they come and solve this problem? Can they hit this quota? Can they develop this piece of software? Can they achieve X, Y, and Z? Companies are now becoming more and more aware of the fact that they need to hire people that are, are you hiring for potential? Can you train them up? So, I typically talk to organizations, and more it's, I put something out a few weeks back on LinkedIn where it was a whole thing about, there was an article in the Times, and I just took it and I used the quote to say, this is the reason why the recruitment industry still matters in this country, because there's a talent shortage. But more and more companies now need to start thinking about hiring is just one way to fill that vacancy. So it's talent acquisition. It's, can you cross-train people in your existing organization? Can you upskill people that might be there, whose roles might be being replaced with technology? How do you start getting people? And I think, we're still not comfortable with this. Are we back to the office? Are we working remotely? Well, the answer is both. You need both, right? So, the future workforce is, you're going to have permanent people, you're going to have contractors, you're going to have gig economy people, you're going to be having hybrid workers, in the office workers, people that will never want to go to an office. So all of a sudden it's become more complicated how to manage people, but also it's an opportunity. And the opportunity is, in theory, if you can bring these things together and make it work, you should be able to have access to more people.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think that, I suppose to summarize really before we start to kind of close down on some of the things that we've talked about already, is that reskilling, upskilling, cross-skilling, the over 50s, the labor shortage. How do we get, there's been a good actually a friend of mine is involved in a business which is an alumni business, which is specifically speaking about people that have left the organization to bring them back into the organization, which again is getting some big traction. Have you got any experience on that side of things as well, Kalpesh?
Yeah, I think, actually, you know what, and again, love them or hate them, let's talk about the accountancy firms in terms of the big they're amazing at building alumni. Typically people leave those firms, they either become customers, they become suppliers in some or another in their ecosystem, or they end up boomeranging back in the organization. So again, it comes back down to, if you don't hire people properly and give them a good experience, you don't manage them while they're within your organization. I talk about the progression journey versus the promotion journey, because in an organization, not everyone wants to get promoted. They want to progress. And you know this with some of the people that you've been getting with your data insights, they just want to feel valued they don't necessarily want to become the CEO or a senior leader. They're quite happy being sort of middle level, etc., but coming in, but have the opportunity of learning new skills or moving in a slightly different direction. If they get bored of doing this job, if they get bored of doing sales, can they do account management?
Can they cross skill? That learning piece is really interesting as well. I mean, I remember, I'll name them because everyone knows from my LinkedIn that I work for them. So I worked for Capita for 8 years, and it's changed a lot, of course. But when I was there, I can quite easily say that it was the culture of that entrepreneurial feel within Capita that enabled us to thrive, and to not everybody thrived. Not everybody, as you say, wanted to become the CEO or the MD or whatever it is. But those of us that wanted to, and it ended up inevitably working hard enough to go and get that done and make that happen. Yeah. And I think that alumni piece, it was so obvious that people wanted to go back. The amount of people that used to come back to Capita, and other organizations, our clients as well, like you see it and you think, wow. So that alumni piece is really important. But again, it goes back to what is the experience that we're giving? Like if you book an airline, this might be a silly analogy, right? But if you book first class in an airline, and because it's got a bigger seat, or I don't know, business class because it's got a bigger seat, and you receive an appalling service, but when you get on the plane, your seat's bigger, you're probably not going to go back. But actually, if you received an amazing service through the booking, through everything you've got, through the lounges, whatever it might be, and actually your seat's slightly smaller, you probably rebook again, because actually it's the experience of that makes it for you rather than the actual event itself. Would that be fair?
No, I think that's it. And look, and again, I think you've touched on this in one of your previous shows as well, but companies spend a lot of time talking about customer experience and making sure the customer's happy. But the reality is, if you look after the employee experience, I think there's some crazy equation someone came up with, EX equals CX. If you look after your employee experience, then that takes care of your customer experience. Those organizations that spend all of their time on the customer experience but don't value their employees tend to fall over eventually. So, if I use a big fast food chain that we all know with Golden Arches, they spend a lot of money on making sure their people, whether you're in charge of burgers, whether you're at the till, whether you're cleaning, but making sure they try and give as much value to that individual, that employee experience, whether it's degrees or MVQs or qualifications, etc. Because they know if that person's looked after, that customer's going to get a decent experience as well.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I completely agree on that. We've talked about insights. Let's talk about just quickly data. How important is data? It never ceases to amaze me, especially in people, in recruitment and people. I think we're still behind. I think we're still behind on people data, analytics, insights. When you look at data in other fields, we cannot live without it. We have to have data on our health for our Apple iWatch phone or or whatever it is. We need to have our heart rate monitor on when we're going exercising, if it's with Nike or Adidas or Apple, whatever it is. We need to have all of that on. Yet when we come into hiring people, which is the most important part of our businesses, because people are the business, we tend to kind of default back into, have you got a couple of sheets of paper? It's called a resume or a CV. Let's have a read through it, because I could definitely tell from 2 pieces of paper the type of individual that you are. Like, why are we behind on that, Kalpesh? Is it just a default button that we all go to?
I think it's comfort, and that's what comes down to. And I think it's I'm reading a book at the moment by a professor called Bernard Marr. He talks a lot about data literacy. So one of our challenges, and if you look at the government pathway in this country, one of the biggest challenges we've got to take our workforce forward is digital skills. Number one, can you people use basic? Can you use your phone to do whatever you may? But data literacy, can you take a bunch of data and understand basic trends? So part of the challenge is, I've had it in my teams. I've probably been guilty of it. I'm going, have you got that CV, rather than going, have you got the interview pack? Can I have a look at all the assessments that I've done, etc., to get a rounded view of the person? Or you go down, I'll just go and have a look at their LinkedIn. It will tell me everything I need to know. The reality is LinkedIn's going to tell you what they want you to know. So I think it is that whole science. And, Are CVs dated? I think we are probably going to see CVs becoming, I wouldn't say a thing of the past and irrelevance, but their values diminish a bit more. But it comes back down to people are just not tuned in, and you produce some incredible data insights when you're helping people with your platform. But if they don't know how to take that data and insight and actually make decisions, it falls over. And look, we know, there's millions and millions and millions or billions of terabytes of data out there. The biggest danger you can ever have is if you haven't taught someone how to read the data and interpret the data, they're always going to make the wrong call. So, do you have data or do you not have data? And
It's a very good point, actually, just to use that in layperson's terms on LinkedIn, for example. If I look at a LinkedIn profile and actually it's only going to give me the information that I kind of want, that they want me to see, if I read in what's in front of me. But if I actually see how many posts they've done, what they post about, what subjects they're passionate about, that starts to give me some real insights into who that individual is. We've had this debate internally about, pushing this into our V2 part of the Phoenix51 platform around that social media aspect. And it's not a live thing. It's definitely, there's an ethical thing about it, but actually reading people's views around on social media, on Twitter, on Instagram, on LinkedIn posts, that gives you could argue, a rounder view of what that individual is than submitting a resume. I mean, somebody's always going to put their best foot forward, aren't they, for a job interview? Yeah. But actually, what we really want to know, I think part of that silver bullet, if one actually exists, what we really want to know is, how does the individual behave when they're under pressure? How does this individual behave when they're up against it, or when things are going well? Do they take their foot off the gas when things are brilliant, or do they keep doing? Now, what is that element of that desire? What does this individual really want? Like, where is their path, if it's a career path or their personal path? Like, because for me, them two things are interlinked. So to be able to have data and insights on them things, and to see and to watch how individuals, I mean, look, let's be honest, I haven't brought it up, so it'd be funny to bring it up now. It's coming up to the final of this year's Apprentice, and I won that show 15 years ago, which is utterly ridiculous. But let's be honest about it. The Apprentice, whether you like it or loathe it, it is a giant assessment center. It is showing it and putting you under pressure in situations, in good situations, bad situations, to see how you can deal with whatever that is thrown at you. And for me, obviously I'm biased because I went through that process, but for me, that is the way to really see how people can actually handle, if you're hiring a salesperson and they've written down that they've hit 150% of target, great. You can take a reference on that or whatever it might be, but it's not until you get them on the environment, on the phone, or in an environment, or in a selling scenario, where you can see, have they got that attention to detail? Do they do that sales methodology to the letter, medic, for example, that enable you to close deals? When you're looking at these technology organizations that have become unicorn status over the last 2-3 years, for example, just in 2021, there was 9 unicorns in the RecTech space, not HRTech, RecTech, 9. Unbelievable. Some phenomenal people out there. If you go and look at what their sales methodologies are and what they're actually doing, most of them are powered by the medic methodology. So it's that attention to detail in that behavior now, rather than hello, Gov, how you getting on? Yeah, and that relationship bit, which might have been 20 years ago. Does that make sense? There's a lot.
100% makes sense. I think that the whole point, what you've just described, is there is a structure and a recipe that people follow to get that. So those 9 unicorn companies have a really clear purpose. Then it goes back down to the top. They've got their DNA very, very clearly mapped out, what problem they're trying to solve and who they're trying to solve it for. But they also understand these individuals. There's a structure of how you get to the other side. And it's, if I go back when I started my early sales career, doing my part-time job selling washing machines many years ago, it was basically someone comes in, they need something, you got rid of it. But actually, if you think about right the way through, solution selling is what we're talking about. There is a problem. This is how we're going to help you deal with that problem. And one of the things I've done over the years in terms of hiring and, right the way through is, I've taken, and I've had it done on me as well, so it's been 2 ways, is 360 references. So, your CV tells me once a week, you'll tell me an amazing story of how you closed the deal. The bit when I come and say to you, Lee, I want to go and speak to 2 of your colleagues if you've been a leader, someone you've managed. I want to go and talk to 2 customers to tell me actually what you actually did. And you get a real different sense of purpose.
That's the insights. And coming back to a point you made in the first half of the show, it's not just one thing. It is a few tools in your toolkit, essentially, or a few technologies or a few processes put together that enables us to get a better result or start to mitigate against, that kind of that talent waste, which is
and your point about the journey and data and insights. Your platform produces a bunch of data at the start of the journey. How does that data, and this is the other thing I'm learning, is how does those different segments of data lead into each other? So when you hire someone, what does that data tell you when someone leaves? It's actually, and that's the problem with HR analytics. It's so much better than it used to be. If you think about, go back 15 years ago, there was nothing, literally nothing. It was, I think, a lot of people use the words, I think this is what's happened. Whereas now we've got data. Our challenge now is, and I'm not that expert, there's far more clever people than I am, Lee, that can start stitching that data together to say, look, by the way, just to let you know, when this person left in 5 years' time, the indicator here was when you hired them, this is the reason why the marker was always there, why they were potential flight risk.
Yeah, and it's using that data, like a brilliant point you made earlier, is how to interpret the data. For me, I'm definitely not the cleverest person probably ever, let alone in this room or on this pod right now. But it's a simplification.
You did win the Apprentice, though.
Well, what I mean. What can you do? But but it's been simple. It's simplifying that information so that we can actually see it. Too much data can be over your head. I'll just default back to the old way. Whereas actually some of the data that we're actually getting, them insights, if it's simple, I can understand that. That's the bit that will enable us to carry that torch and move it forward and change essentially what has been the default button for 500 years in some instances.
And the other thing, Lee, we're both big football fans. You can see it. Everyone always has an opinion on have they played right, or have they selected a team right, or have they hired the right manager, whatever it might be. But the thing about data is just static. Data is just a repository of numbers or information, if it's qualitative, quantitative. The insights, the output. The bit where the change comes in is you've now got the insight saying, we've taken your data, this is what we've found, point 1, point 2, point 3. And then bit now, and this is the bit where I'm hoping we'll start moving forward, is now this means the action that you need to take.
Yes.
And that's the bit that's missing that.
Yeah, exactly that. Kalpesh, you've been absolutely fantastic. Just tell our viewers and listeners where they can find you. Like I said right at the beginning, consulting, advisory, non-exec director. You've been a leader. You're a chief executive. Loads of stuff going on. Where can we find you, Kalpesh?
Really easy. You'll if you guys anyone's at the Rec Expo, come and find me. I'll be walking around having a chat with a bunch of people, and I think you're there as well. So I'm sure we'll. There's a story. I'm sure at some point we'll share how it took us 3 years to actually meet each other eventually. And apart from that, you'll find me on LinkedIn, because I believe actually, look, what I do is, if you go on LinkedIn, you'll find me, you'll find my profile, check my posts out if you want to know what I'm actually interested in, what's important as well, taking a lead, learn there. And then look, apart from that, just reach out. And I think the big thing I'd say to everyone is we will come through this, but it's going to take everyone to do their part.
Yeah, I totally agree. And a brilliant way to finish the show. Kalpesh, you've been absolutely fantastic. We've been a Talent Way show. Please tune in. Don't forget to subscribe. You can look at us on YouTube. You can also get us as well on Spotify from an audio version. And we'll see you next time.